All right, hi. So we continue our conversation from where we left off. Just going to pause to find out if people have any specific questions with regards to what we did the last time we met. Anything? Nothing. Okay. Motivation around persistently storing data, right? And a key. Oh, sorry about that. Key output from our conversation, or one of the I guess one of the important things that we highlighted was the fact that this whole notion of persistently storing data is contextual, right? So it depends on why you're storing that data in the first place, right? So there's different use cases down from at the organization level, all the way up to the individual, right? So I would like to think that you probably have a few things laying around that you might want to hold on to, at least for the next 10, maybe 20 years, right? Question to ask is, where exactly are you going to persistently store that information, right? Perhaps you're one of those people who has access to the free-tier version of Dropbox, for instance, and so you're taking advantage of that. Key thing here is that the Dropbox servers, obviously, the Dropbox servers that you access are hooked onto storage infrastructure, right? So storage mediums and storage devices, similar to what you use at a personal level, essentially, but on a relatively large scale. In certain instances, like for large organizations, typically data will be archived to tape, right? And we'll look at drawbacks, or rather pros and cons for storing data to storage mediums like tapes, for instance. What you immediately realize is that this idea of how quickly you can get a hold of the data becomes really important, right? So the decision on whether to store data to tape or onto some network storage device, for instance, would be dependent on how quickly you might want to gain access to the data. So a lot of interesting things we discussed. And then we left off at a point where we were essentially, because we're still discussing file organization and file systems, essentially. So we got to a stage where we started discussing so-called metadata, right? So different traits or characteristics associated with a file. We discovered that these things we're calling files come in two variations. So there's regular files and directories, or folders as they're called in Windows. They're all files with one key difference. So these things we call directories and folders are container structures. So you can use them to come up with the logical organization of the sort of files that you want to persistently store in a computer system on a storage medium. So it's a container structure that is able to house other files, or other directories and subdirectories and subdirectories, and more importantly, the regular files. So these would be the entities that actually contain or comprise of the actual content that users would be interested in. Right. So we walked through these different characteristics, right? Associated with files, these metadata elements, as they're calling them. I wanted to mention something here. I was throwing at you a couple of things here. I highlighted the fact that if you think about it, some of this metadata is, and you will notice actually, it's administrative, right? So it's there to ensure that you can secure the files, right? For instance, some of it is structural, so things like the location of the file, it's structural metadata because it tells you exactly where on the file system the file is located, right? And in fact, if you look at the typical file path, what you will realize is that typically most operating systems, not all of them actually, will provide you with a hierarchical representation of where exactly that particular file is located. And really, I've been showcasing some pretty interesting commands like the tree command, for instance, which will show you a really nicely formatted tree structure of your directory. It's probably horrible here, of your directory, right? So if I went in here and said I just want to print directories, I can gain a better sense of how this location on my computer system or on my internal hard drive or hard disk, how this particular location is actually structured, right? Without really going into using my file manager, right? To say, poking around, trial and error. Is that file under wake, or is it in 2020 or something? Oh, it's not. Then I go back and then I start going into general. Oh, it's not here. I go into academic and I go into here. It's not there. But such commands will kind of help you find what you're looking for. And really interesting enough is that you will soon see that some of these more sophisticated file managers will actually allow you to present information in a tree-like structure, right? So similar to the tree command that I'm showcasing there. You do this in Windows. Okay, so a lot of things we looked at, right? So timestamps and location and size, the tag. And we left off at a stage where we're supposed to just give an illustration, right? To kind of showcase exactly how these different types of metadata elements actually get to be associated to files or how they're used, right? So we proceed with our very trivial example, right? I have some random examples here. The illustration, we'll start with the file name, right? Typically, there are rules, right? There are rules that govern exactly how you name a file. It's usually a combination of, well, there could be a restriction in terms of like certain special characters, for instance, that you can't use. I wonder if there's can we name a file with just say, can we name a file with let's see if we can name a file with question mark and ICT 1110. Oh, we can, right? Is there? But of course, you notice that it's in quotes. What of a file with an asterisk? Oh, we can. Wow, this is interesting.
Try naming a file with an emoji.
Yeah, but an emoji would be still, these are special characters, right? Like a smiley face. Clearly, the parentheses here, you notice, if I try and use the emoji with a smiley face with a full colon and closing parentheses, what you notice is that there's a bit of an issue here with a parenthesis. I guess I can mask it though, right? And be able to name it. So you notice that I can name it by masking it, right? So you notice that. So, but in any case, anyway, there are generally rules that govern, not to be stupid, right? People would look at you strange, say, why would you name a file with an emoji? File name using emoji or something, I don't know. People would look at you strange. But anyways, so a file has a name, right? Usually, it's always nice for you to just stick with, so if you're an English-speaking person, just stick with the alphabet and numbers. Well, I use certain characters sparingly myself. So if you notice the slides that you download on the Moodle, there's a certain pattern. This is my convention. I'm not saying this is how things should be, right? This is how I name my files. I do not name my files with a space. Don't do that. You don't do that because there are certain operating systems that are a bit sensitive to spaces, like Linux, for instance. If I want to create a file with a space, ICT space 1110, you will notice that it will have, and this is the thing here, it created two separate directories. It thinks that I want to create ICT and 1110, right? What you would have to do for you to create that file with a space is you mask the space, right? And then you find that You have a directory that is like so. Now, the problem with this is every time you want to access this file, you would have to escape the special character, right? So ICT, right? Like that. If I just run ICT without that, nothing will happen here, right? It will think that if I want to make reference to the two other files, which I can delete actually. So that you look at this example here. So if I wanted to make reference to this, you notice that changing directory into ICT 11, you notice it's going to mask it out. If I don't mask it out, it will tell me that too many arguments. It thinks that there are two separate folders I want to make reference to. Right, so a file has a name. This is one way of uniquely setting it apart from other files on the file system. And more importantly, in the location, in each current location, the current folder, right? Why is this important? Because file names are unique, are supposed to be unique, right? So very, very important anyway. All right, so just a random example here. And usually you notice that your typical file obviously will have, let's see here, directories, illustration. Your typical file, a regular file, by convention, right? Take note of this, by convention, will have an extension. Usually, again, by convention, the extension will have 3 characters. So after the dot, after the period here, the dot, the last 3 characters in the name represent the extension of that file. It's a signal. It's applicable to human beings, actually. It tells a human being to say the contents of this file is encoded. This file is a PDF document. If I say anything with a docx, I know it's a Word document. .doc is a Word document. .mp4 is a video file. .wav is a sound file, right? .ogg is a sound file. But the interesting thing here, .txt is a text file. Interesting thing here is if we were to create, let's just use the file manager here. If we were to create, oh, we have the DRI example. I'm just going to delete all these things here. Right? If we were to create a file, a text file here, right, and name it sample text file, .txt. What we're saying is that we want to use the txt so that we tell whoever is going to see this file. If you are sending, remember, one of the things you're going to do to a file is you send it to someone, right? Sample txt text file, I guess. The idea behind this extension is you want to tell the person who's going to view this that this is a text file. Why is that important? So that they know a specific application that they should use to access this application. It doesn't necessarily mean that removing the extension will change a thing. I can remove the extension, provided I'm the only one who's going to have access to this file. Right? And I can still open this because I know that it's a text file, I'll still gain access to it, I'll open it, right? The same goes for PDF documents. Observe, if I went up to, I guess if I went up to, okay, we'll just go to downloads and then get the current file, right? PDF document that we have right now, dump it in here. Now that was stupid because we're using up space here, but that's fine. We dump it in here. What we're saying is that if we check the properties of this file, Dolphin knows that this is a PDF, right? Document. It's just by convention that it should be .pdf. Can remove the extension about doing this is that the person, if I was to send this to you without actually including the .pdf extension, you'd be surprised as to what sort of file it is, right? In fact, Moodle will probably refuse because our Moodle is currently configured to only accept PDF documents. Observe, an interesting thing is I could foolishly say, sure, this is a PDF document, but I will just say it's a .doc, right? And my operating system will allow me to do this because the extension is just there for convention. But if I check the properties, yeah, you see that it's encoded in PDF, right? So the things to just keep at the back of your mind here that if you look at your typical file, the last the last characters after the period, after the dot, would be the extension, right? Conventionally, it tells you what sort of data is encoded in that particular file. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have a file which instead of hyphens, you have dots here. You can do that. At least my operating system or the file system I'm using right now allows me to do this. It's fine, right? I can have this file which funny enough, has dots here, right? But still, everything that appears after the last dot is supposed to be the extension by convention. And also, don't think that all extensions are supposed to be 3 characters. No, there is .docx, right? There's a couple of weird things that you'll probably come across, but most of them will typically have 3 characters: MP4, MP3, doc, PDF, WAV, OGG, right? Okay. Just I guess showcasing a file name here. If you're using the terminal, right? Just issuing an ls command here. Same thing happens here if you use your file your file manager to check the properties of the file. Depending on what sort of operating system you're using, there will typically be information with regards to the file name or the file itself. So you notice that in terms of Dolphin here, it comes under the general tab here. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
what would happen if we had changed the PDF extension to, let's say, docx, which is for Microsoft Word?
Nothing. This is what I've done here. What has happened here is, if you notice what has happened, when I change it to docx, right? What my operating system thinks, the way I've configured my operating system is that certain file extensions are supposed to be opened by default using certain applications, yeah? And so, because of the default configuration I have, every time I have a certain type of extension, like a .doc or .docx, the icon will change. You notice this icon is like the file manager seems to suggest that this is what? This is a Word document, right?
Yes,
But, and I've confused my file manager here, but I think file should be able to do the correct thing. But if I open file, right, file will tell me the file command will tell me that this is a PDF encoded document. And in fact, because, and this is what some people use these as cheap tricks, right? If you use like a publicly accessible computer, for instance, and you want to hide data, what you do is you would change the extension if you're smart enough, right? You change the extension to deceive people that it's a different type of file. In actual fact, it would be something completely different. But you yourself know the data that's encoded in that file. Because you know, you'll be able to launch the correct application. So in this case, because by default, I'm supposed to use LibreOffice Writer to open .docx, but I know that this is PDF, I'll say open with, I'll say other, and then I'll say ocular, yeah? Because I know ocular opens PDF. And I'll be able to view the, oh, come on. I'll be able to view the file. And I guess my file manager here is a bit problematic. But if I come here and I should be able to open this. I seem to have confused my file. I seem to have confused my operating system here. But in an ideal case, I mean, you should be able to open this thing without a problem. Maybe if I use it, let me just try Evans. I'm probably using the wrong. Okay, it's confused here. Let me just try Evans. Document viewer, right? Yeah, you see that Evans. So Ocular, forget about Ocular. Ocular is going to be stupid sometimes. But you notice that Evans is more concerned with the data that's encoded in the file, not the file extension, right? So to answer your question, what would happen is nothing would happen, right? All you're doing is you'd probably be fooling your file manager. You're fooling it because it's usually configured in such a way that it behaves differently depending on the extension that you have as part of your file name, right? Okay, So you can check out these things. Yes.
So there's,
Listen.
someone is requesting for you to repeat what you said about conventions in the comment section.
What about conventions? Do you want to read it on their behalf? I mean, context switching is a bit it can be disturbing. Do you want to read their question on their behalf?
It's saying, sir, could you repeat what you said about file convention?
Yeah, well, I mean, I said a couple of things here. I said that I guess the most important thing, you see a file, right? A file is made up of, it's a series of characters here. But if you look at the series of characters, there's a portion that will represent the name of the file. Technically speaking, all of this is the file name, right? A whole lot of this is the file name here. But technically speaking, the name that you specify, you yourself specify, is this part here, without the extension, yeah? What we are saying in terms of convention is that by convention, everything that appears after the last period is meant to be the extension of the file. Extension of the file tells you, putatively, the data that is encoded within that regular file, right? So this last bit here, it tells you the type of file, right? And maybe we can go into a directory that has a lot more things here. So if maybe I can order these by size, for instance. Every time I look at, on my computer, every time I find a file with a .zip, I know this is an archive, right? It's a zip file, so I'll need to open it using a utility that is able to extract data, right? Data that's compressed using, what compression algorithm is this? But anyway, so it's a zip file, it's an archive. Every time I see a .mp4, I know that it's a video file. By virtue of the extension, every time I see a .xlsx, I know this is a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet file, right? It's an Excel file. Now these things, right? You would know these things by experience. So if you use certain types of applications, if you've been using them over a prolonged period of time, it's a lot more intuitive for you to know what sort of files these are, right? Zip. A .sh, I know that this is a shell script. Yes, sir.
Sir, is it possible that after changing the extension from PDF to PowerPoint, PPT, it is possible that it cannot open in Microsoft Word, but in PowerPoint, just because you changed the extension?
So, sorry, come again?
For example, I open my PDFs with, let's say, LibreOffice. And just because I changed the extension to PPT, PowerPoint, is it possible for the file not to open in LibreOffice as my default, but also open in
No, but it
Office?
does. It does. I mean, it will open. So what you're saying, there's a couple of interesting things here, right? Number one, what you have to appreciate is the fact that there are certain types of applications that have evolved. Like, for instance, this LibreOffice you're talking about here. I don't know if it could be LibreOffice, I don't know here. But it's evolved to such an extent that you can, I think, I could be wrong here. By the way, these are all the same file, same size and whatnot, right? It's evolved to enable you, it's LibreOffice has evolved in such a way that you are able to open PDF documents, right? LibreOffice allows you to open a PDF document. Observe, LibreOffice, draw. I will import. I will view the PDF document, right? It'll take a couple of times, but I will be able to open it up, yeah? Because behind the scenes, what's happening is obviously, I mean, it knows that this is a PDF file, this guy, I don't know what this guy is doing, but maybe he wants to edit the PDF document, so I will import the PDF for him to enable him edit it or something. You notice on top here, it's a PDF document, yeah? So it is possible.
Yes, how about if it's Microsoft, it's doc for Microsoft Word, huh? And then you just change the doc and the extension to PPT. Is it possible it won't open in Microsoft Word, but just open in just because the extension, does it matter so much that the file, the machine can be manipulated to think that this file can no longer be opened in doc or in what's this in Microsoft Word.
It matters. It matters to the extent where it matters to the extent of how you've configured your machine. Now, I don't want to speak on behalf of Windows because I've not used that thing in a very long time. I don't know how much it's changed or evolved over time. But if you change a PPT file to a doc file, what you're telling your operating system, right, or depending on how you configured your file manager, what you're telling your file manager is that you want to use Microsoft Office Word, right, to open that file. If Word, I don't know how Word works, but if Word is unable to open, if Word is not able to recognize the encoding associated with PPT, then it's not going to be possible. You'd have to check it. I don't know, but what I can do is I can showcase to you the behavior of my word processor. Right? Observe. I'm going to download this current PowerPoint presentation, not as PDF, but I'll download it as a PPT. I will also download it as an ODP actually, just to. I guess this will make for a really interesting experiment. So I'll download it as a PPT and the ODP. So PPT is obviously it's meant to be opened using PowerPoint, right? But your average spreadsheet application should be able to open this. So for instance, LibreOffice Impress in my case will be able to open this. But observe, I dump it here, and I tell this to say, I'm just gonna just rename this so that we don't confuse things, right? I'm going to rename this. This is a PowerPoint slide. This is a slide deck, right? It's PowerPoint. Observe, if by default, I have to open it using LibreOffice Impress. I've opened this slide deck, right? Quick experiment. Let's fool LibreOffice into thinking, or let's fool my operating system into thinking, my file manager in this case, into thinking that this is an actual fact a doc file, right? I guess I need to refresh this or something. I don't know how long it takes for this to change the icon here, but I was expecting it to change the icon from, let's change it docx, I guess. Okay, so I've changed it to docx. I probably haven't configured my file manager to recognize .doc as being a web process or something, but that's besides the point. So you notice I've changed this. It's a PPT file, right? And we know this is a PPT file because if I run very nifty, oops, sorry about that. If I run my nifty application here, command line application here, you notice, okay, it thinks this is zip archive here because file, this is Linux and file doesn't recognize .docx, that's fine. But if I open this using LibreOffice Writer, it's a PowerPoint slide. It's a slide deck. Oh, so my LibreOffice obviously behaves in a rather interesting way where I can actually open PPTX files using LibreOffice Impress. Using LibreOffice Writer. But you notice that behind the scenes here, it actually, if you see on top here, this is LibreOffice Impress, right? It's a bit. Let's try and see if we can do some other weird thing. Let's explicitly open it from right within LibreOffice Writer and see exactly how it's going to behave. The short answer to your question is it depends on the operating system that you're using, and you'd have to do you'd have to experiment with this yourself. So this won't work in my case because I'm using an integrated suite, right? It's a package that comes. It's an all-in-one type of package. LibreOffice has Impress, it has Writer, it has Draw, all the good stuff, right? Which is why if I open the file. If I open the file from within, let's say Writer, but it's a PPT file, it's smart enough to know that actually this file is encoded using a certain format. It's supposed to be a slide deck. It's not a Word document. You'd have to check this out or experiment with it on Windows. I can't speak for Windows, sadly. The only thing here is that it depends on the type of application you're using. So if your application is designed in such a way that it's able to automatically detect the encoding, then it won't be an issue. Anyone Anyone have an idea as to why you might want to, I think I already said this, why you might want to fool people into thinking this is a Word document when it's actually a movie, right? It's a .doc, but, or you say draft assignment, or docx. Now, when I was a student myself, this is how very bad people used to trick others into downloading viruses, yeah? You create this executable file. It's presented as being a Word document or a movie, right? It's like Avengers, right? Avengers, whatever, right? Avengers.mp4. And then you make it available somewhere, and then this character comes, the person who wants to download illegal files, right? Comes along and, oh, I found Avengers, the latest, I don't know which is the latest one here, I'm losing track. But the moment they double click this, they're infected, right? Extensions. But the smart people will check, and especially if you know that you're getting files from an unknown source, an untrusted source, you would use sophisticated applications to check what sort of encoding is associated with the file. Is this making sense? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I thought so too. Right. So, so the other thing here is this idea of size. We talked about size. So just to illustrate how size is typically represented on your file system, depending on the type of application that you're using. So if it's a sophisticated file browser, a file manager rather, it will be able to present the size in a human readable format for you, right? So you don't have to do any sort of tweaking, right? It knows, by looking at the size, it knows how to represent it by virtue of looking at the size of the document. Observe, if I order this by size, my file manager, depending on how large the file is presenting these documents in megabytes, right? It might be here. As I scroll down here, some files are being represented in hopefully kilobytes somewhere at the bottom here, kilobytes, right? The smaller files are going to be presented in bytes, right? B. Because it knows that it doesn't make sense for you to represent 130 bytes into kilobytes, because it would be like 0 point something, which is not as intuitive as 131, for instance. Right? Same happens actually when you explicitly right-click on the file and just view properties. This cuts across all the different types of file managers for different applications for different operating systems. Rather, I was looking for a much larger file here. Maybe I should be able to find something here. Right? So you notice that if I order this, the larger files are presented in gigabytes. And in fact, if I had even larger files, they'll probably be presented in terabytes or something, right? Or if I was to merge some of these MP4s into one, for instance. Right? Same happens when you check the properties. By default, you will be presented by a human readable representation of the size, but also in brackets, the actual bytes, the equivalent bytes, right? And you notice here, all we're doing here is just multiplying 1.9 by 1024 to the power 3, right? Gigabyte, megabyte, kilobyte, right? Right, so on the terminal, obviously, depending on the sort of application that you're using, like the famous ls command to list the files, by default, your ls command will obviously show you the files in bytes, right? So if I do an ls here, you'll notice that MP4, you'll notice that just do a file, the directory, I know that. Okay, I'm just going to go in here then if you don't want to. So if I do the ls and I want to just list the larger files, which are the MP4 files, if I do an ls and say MP4, you notice that these files are represented in bytes, right? This is in bytes here, bytes. But if you look at this, it's a large file, so representing it in this form is not as intuitive as representing it in a human readable form, right? So I'll use the H flag here so that I see the human readable format of the file size. You don't have to use the terminal. You can use your file manager if you want to. Whatever tickles your fancy is fine. Just a reminder here that the representation obviously takes into account all these derived units, right? So kilobyte, megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, petabyte, zettabyte, everything, right? Exabytes. A key thing is the multiples of 1024. I don't know, somebody has their microphone on, probably want to mute it or something. So this is what I already said, to say if you want to use a GUI-based application, like a file manager, for instance, you'll be able to gain access to the same type of information you would gain access to if you use a terminal, right? So notice the size here is represented in a human readable format, and then in parentheses, you have the bytes. So on Linux, it's specific to Linux, and we're saying specific to Linux because our case study is going to be on the Unix operating system here. The part that, if you're using the terminal, the part that signals that this is a regular file is the hyphen on the far left when you issue the ls command, right? But of course, if you use your file manager, you right click and you say properties, you'll be able to see that it's a regular file by looking at the specific encoding associated with that file. So properties, I see here that it's clearly, it's a regular file, right? Because it's encoded with specific data format. This is MP4. If I, on the other hand, if I right click this and check the properties, you notice that it's telling me it's directory, right? All right, I'm not sure about how Windows kind of like works in terms of what, as far as the type is concerned, what value you get to see when you right click, for instance. I do hope, I doubt if it will tell you that this is a regular file, but it will show you the encoding, right? The encoding, the actual encoding by using the conventional extension associated with the data that's encoded in that particular file. So every time I see a PDF, application/PDF here, I know that this is encoded in PDF, right? MP4, I know it's encoded using MP4. So something else we highlighted was this notion of a timestamp, right? And we highlighted the fact that there's different types of timestamps. So the date when the file was created, the date when it was last modified, so when additional bits were added to the file, when bits were removed from the file, if some contents were deleted, you'll be able to see when they were deleted by looking at the timestamp. But also, for some operating systems, even the date when the file was last accessed, right? So you have different types of timestamps here. In this particular case, I do believe this is the modified date, I think. I could be wrong, but we can always check if we are wrong or right. Remember that we just created this file here called sample txt file here. I don't know if people remember this, but this file here, which has sample text, yeah. If you look at the date, it's 1713. Let me use the file manager so that it's not as confusing. The sample text file, I have, it's the last modified date. I have access to last modified date and last access date, right? If I open this file, right, using OCUL, and then I add an additional line, you'll notice that I haven't said this yet. This was last modified at 1713, right? 1713. The moment I save this, I add additional bits to this file, and I check the properties, the date changes to 1739, right? Obviously, the access date also changes because for me to add bits there, I have to access the file. The same thing happens if you open it up and you remove bits, right? So I'll remove, how many bits are these? I'm going to remove 16 bits, right? Save this, you notice that the date is going to change, right? 1740, the 7th second. It's almost always the case for you to access what's called the Unix timestamp. So the accuracy is down to the millisecond here. And usually extremely useful if you're writing certain sophisticated programs, obviously. But when you're using your file manager, the representation is only down to the second, right? Very few people would want to see the millisecond when it was last updated or something. Usually preview. All right, so just a different variation of showcasing the timestamp, right? Metadata associated with the timestamp. In this case, using Dolphin, I can view the modified and accessed data. Now, interesting thing about some of these things you view in the operating system is, again, it depends on how you've is there an advanced feature somewhere? On how, I hope there is, on how you've more actions. I'm going to this here. More actions. I'm trying to see if I can we can see a lot more fields than we can see right now. And I don't normally use my file manager here, which is a bit weird. Let me see if I can. Is it configure this? No. Icon size. It is on top here. Actions. Action shortcut. No. Oh, sorry. I was trying to see if I could configure this thing in such a way that we can see a lot more fields than there is supposed to be. Configure toolbar. Is there a way I can view my menu here? About, access, comment, panel. Anyway, it appears this thing doesn't want to. I could have sworn it's supposed to be here. Is it just my special Windows settings? Resize, not resize. Simply don't want to resize this. So what I was trying to see is to see if we can. Yeah, maybe it's okay. Control. Okay, show menu bar, settings, view, file modes. No. Quite unfortunate. I thought there would be Dolphin settings, maybe. I thought there would be an easier way of telling settings, view mode details. You know. So just telling my file browser what details I want to see when I'm. I guess the closest I can go here is just to, just show hidden files. I guess this is not what I wanted. I was hoping I could. We could additionally. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So you notice under additional information, in my case, I'll showcase date created, additional information. I'll just tick these. I want to see the type. I want to see the tags associated with the file. And what you immediately notice is all of these different things here, metadata elements, right? Some of these things we didn't even talk about, like they're not really that important. I mean, comments and whatnot. But all of these things, you can activate them so that you are able to see slightly more additional information. So for documents, I want to see the title. I want to see, this would be weird. I want to see the count for documents. I also want to see, the line count. And you immediately see here that when we go to that directory where we had DII example, I don't know if you can see the top part here. Okay, I would have to do that, I guess, when I'm accessing the file manager now. Right, so I have access to all this auxiliary information. Depending on whether you think that this is stuff, I guess, that is important for you, Again, depending on the type of user you are, depending on what you use
Sir,
this computer system for. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
is it
Sorry, I can't get what you're saying. You're breaking up. I don't know if it's my connection or your connection. Is it just me or is everybody having trouble getting the previous question?
It's everyone.
Hello?
Yeah, it's everyone.
Okay. Okay, so then the problem is his. Okay, fine. Right, so that's that. I hope this is making sense, right? Put into practice most of these things that we take for granted when we are playing around with Fortran, especially for power users, right? Because just by looking at some of this information you have access to here, you can already make certain decisions. If it's a slightly large file, you know that it wouldn't be able to fit on a flash because your flash has slightly less space, right? So either you just don't waste time to move that file to the flash disk or the thumb drive,
sir?
or you delete files on the thumb drive to reclaim space. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had logged off. I don't know how. Is it possible that you can just right click on a file you want to download and then check the properties, or it's always you need a software to tell you what type of encoding is there on the file you're about to download?
But you can't do that with a file you want to download. This is not possible. But web browser doesn't have that mechanism. You know why? Because all the web browser does here, you have to appreciate what happens when you're using a web browser, right? Observe, when you're accessing a web browser, right, there's this whole notion of so-called client-server architecture, right? Where you have your, let's say your phone here, and you want to access Moodle, right? This is your phone, and this is Moodle. What you're doing when you're accessing Moodle is you send a request to Moodle to say, I want to download that file, right? And the way that you specify that you want to download this file is that maybe the first thing you do is you issue a request to say, I want to view a certain page, a certain Moodle application page, an HTML page, right? Observe, if I come here and I say, I'm just going to go to Moodle, for instance. When I access the ICT 1110 page, I go here. What I'm seeing here is that when I clicked on that link, what I'm seeing is the response coming back from the server. It's pretty much static, really. This is being rendered by your browser. At this point, your browser has no clue what this file type is here, right? So right-clicking and then trying to say properties will not help you in any way, right? Because you're interacting with a browser at this point in time, you could send back the type, right? So, but it's not usually intuitive. If I check the type here of, come on, if you can see this, but if this thing is slow now. No idea why. Oh, man. What to do? Okay, I need to close some files. But in essence, you have to appreciate what happens during your interaction with a remote machine.
Sir,
Right?
I'm trying to say, like, for example, it's some malicious software you're about to access. So you just can't know which one is until you install it, and then all your files are gone. Hello?
Is it just me or Sarah?
The source connection was lost.
Yeah, the size was gone.
Yeah, it was my machine is can be slow here. Yes, sorry. How can I? What is the question?
The question is there no other way you can know that the type of software you're about to download is malicious until you download it and then all of a sudden your files are gone? There's no way you can tell the type of
Oh, I mean, the only way you can tell is once you down the way to tell is you download the file, do not run it, download it, and then interrogate it, right? Hopefully you have what do you call this? Hopefully you have like an antivirus software on your computer. If you're not using a Unix-like operating system, hopefully you have antivirus software, and then your antivirus software will be able to scan that file on your behalf before you execute it. Right, so that's the only way you can tell. You can't check content that's on a remote server. You don't have access to that remote server. You're at mercy of how the owners of that server want to present that information to you. So no. I hope that makes sense.
So I also have a question. Yes.
Okay.
What if in an instance where, or just to take you back on the extensions, the file extensions for the MP4 files, the docx and everything.
Yes.
What if an instance where your desired application of file of download is an MP4 file, quite right? And then you go on the site, you find it, and then you download it, and it shows everything. The properties are showing an MP4 file. Then you open it, then it doesn't show video contents, but only audio contents. Despite you opening it on any other media player that is able to open that file, but it only shows, it doesn't show anything, but only plays audio contents.
Yeah, then you probably,
what could be a problem in that instance?
then it's like
Oh, sorry, I'm breaking up.
you
So I can't get anything.
We can't get you, sir.
You're breaking up for real.
probably
Kwenye kabisa.
we don't have the right codec. Hello, can you hear me?
Now yes, now we can.
Yes, sir.
Now we can.
Yes, we can
Yeah,
get
sorry
you.
about that. My computer is a bit thing. I think I have.
Actually, it's still breaking, sir.
The number of important is it to download an MP4 file and then you're unable to play back the video, but you can listen to the sound or something. Has this happened to you, or it's a bit strange? I've never heard of anything.
Yes, it has.
Yes.
I experienced it 2 days ago, and I still can't figure out what the problem is.
Yeah, well, the best you can do is if you could share that MP4 file, right? We can poke around and look at it. It's likely that I don't know what application you were using to try and play back the video. Maybe you don't have the right codecs or something. I don't know, but it's very highly unusual that you can listen to the sound, but there's no video.
I'll try to share the link. Otherwise, I tried
Yeah,
it on my phone. I tried the VOC file on my PC. Still, it didn't play the video, only the audio. But I'll share the link and then you see what you can do with it.
Okay. All right.
Well, and at times, Dr. Lighton, there are also some websites that indicate that you can download this MP4 without audio, or maybe when Mr. Collins was trying to download, it turns out maybe that MP4 was not provided with the bits for audio signals. Maybe it can be that situation, because there are some cases where I'm downloading a video file, and then there are options with different bytes to say video and sound, maybe it will be 200 megabytes.
Yeah, okay, that's the thing.
In such
I use
instances, I don't know.
Yo, Patrick.
Yes?
Another
Could you mute
it
your...
did very well, but then that specific file couldn't play. But the other files, if I download them from there, and despite them giving me those options, I would still pick the one that has to give me all the contents. But that one specifically didn't play. So I don't know if the glitch was with the file upload, or I don't know.
Yeah, this part about the encoding, different encodings, studio, about different encodings. I mean, YouTube does this a lot, right? But I don't think that it applies here. What he's saying is he's saying that he's unable to. He can hear the sound, but he's unable to play back, right? The video. That's what he's saying. Now, this what the other person was talking about here is YouTube, right? YouTube would typically do this a lot. So in YouTube, if you can just do this. If you, I hope this works. If you try and check the different file formats associated with YouTube will do this a lot. So you can download, and let me just use a different, a terminal with slightly smaller font so that you can see what I'm doing here. What the other person is talking about here is that if you, before you download a video from YouTube, you know what sort of application you are using. There are certain file formats where you have access to audio only or video only. But if it's a file that's encoded in MP4, it should have sound. It should have sound and video, right? If you notice here, the only files here that are, unless if you are referring to M4A or something and you thought it was MP4 or something, which is why I'm saying you should share that file so that we check that it's actually an MP4 file. In fact, so that we verify that maybe you downloaded it from a source where it's an MP3 file, but the person just changed the extension and said this is MP4 and you've been fooled, right? To think that it's an MP4 file. Ideally, when you're encoding video using MP4, you're signaling to whatever encoder you're using that you're going to combine audio and video. Unless if you create, I don't know what you could see in VOC, if you create a video where it's just a dark, like it's just pitch black, right? This is like your window, but there's sound, right? You record a black screen or something with sound. That's also possible, I don't know. Which is what we're saying, if you could share whatever it is you have, that would really help. Okay, I hope this is making sense. It is for me anyway. See file, additional characteristics, illustration. I think we can finish this. Right, so timestamp, and then there's the location. Obviously, it's structured metadata. It tells you the relative location or absolute location of a particular file on the file system. Depending on the type of file system you're using, for Unix-like operating systems, your root is obviously /, but on platforms such as Windows, you typically have different drives, right? You can have different roots. So you have your C drive, C full colon, is it / or something? I don't know if it's for / actually, or D drive if you've petitioned your drive, right? Or if you have different hard disk, or if you've plugged in a separate drive. Interesting thing, right? Interesting thing about the behavior on operating systems like Unix-like operating systems is I don't know if I can do this, but if I'm to plug in, I just plugged in a USB stick, right? And you notice it's come up here, it has Ubuntu in it, right? If I open this, oh, come on. If I open up the USB stick, what you will notice is that if I view the location here, you notice everything starts from the root, right? It's unlike your, so everything that you mount onto a Unix-like operating system, and we'll talk about this, is relative to the root file path, which is /. But if you were to plug in a USB stick onto your Windows operating system, I don't know if this is the case, but it used to be the case many years ago when I used Windows myself. Your internal disk will probably be a C. Everything you plug in, well, maybe your D drive, maybe if you have thing will be a D or something. Is it /? No, it's /. If you plug in something else, it would be an E or something. Something else would be an F, right? For Linux, everything is mounted onto the root, right? So you notice that my thumb drive is mounted on the root here. Right, so location, right? Structural metadata tells you where on the file system a file is located. I guess the interesting thing about locations is that it can either be relative or absolute, right? So an absolute location would be something similar to what you can see here, the highlighted part here, where the path is going to it's going to be shown to you from the root itself. So from the root itself, but your relative path would be relative to the directory where the file is. So it's not uncommon for you to see something like this. Observe, if I want to get to this file here, this file is in this location, right? In this location, /home/lighton/dir example. And true to that, if I do a file, okay, I'm just gonna slide. Observe, I'm going to move here, slightly smaller font size here. If I do a file and then I say slides like that, right? This is the absolute part here, this part here. But I could also gain access to this same file by referring to it using the relative path. It's relative to a certain location. Usually it could be relative to a home directory in this case, a tilde symbol at the beginning here. So if I run file tilde home directory, and then I say dir example, right? And then I say slides like that, it's the same file. You see this? So this location would be the relative path, yeah? Relative path, because it's relative to my home directory in this case, this part here, the relative path, but the absolute path of this same file is this. And now, I mean, you're sitting there probably wondering, well, why would I want to do this? Well, it's much faster when accessing files using the terminal. In certain instances, when writing programs, it's advisable to refer files using relative locations rather than absolute locations, because if you use an absolute location like this, and you ship that program to somebody else, that somebody else log in with different credentials and not Lighton period, because this is my username, and so you probably have exceptions, right? So there's a number of interesting scenarios where you might want to make reference to a relative path as opposed to an absolute path.
Sir, you are breaking up. Sir, you are breaking up.
Okay, am I breaking up for everybody else, or it's just one person?
You are breaking, sir.
Yes,
You
sir.
are breaking.
Yes, sir.
Is that any better? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Is that better? That's better. Eh? Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
I was just talking about relative paths and absolute paths, just to kind of emphasize on that, with the fact that there are some scenarios where you might want to make reference to a relative path rather than an absolute path. When I'm defining
Dr. Lighton, on the same relative and absolute path.
yeah.
When you write an absolute path, like the same example. Can you first of all turn off your microphone, Dr. Lighton? Second.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yes. I was saying that when you write an absolute path.
It's probably your end. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's either you or somebody else has the microphone.
Sir, your mic is giving an echo.
Hearing feedback from Nano State, who's talking?
Continue,
Oh
Patrick.
yes. Dr. Lighton, I was saying that when on absolute and relative path, when you write a tilde, since we're looking at the Linux-based OS, when you write a tilde and a tilde forward slash and then downloads, uh, does the operating system what does it mean exactly? Does it mean that the operating system will know, will just identify to say that okay, this directory downloads is found in the root folder on this machine. Like when you write an absolute path, you are coming from home, light on directory, so it's more like the operating, when you write that command, you are sure that the operating system will know what you are writing. But when you write maybe change directory to tilde, the same example of put up a change directory like tilde then forward slash the example then slides mean this relative path, the operating system knows automatically to say that okay, this is actually found in is the same as just writing a root home light on play their example and then slides. So if you just write, you normally just indicate one forward slash, that's all. And if I want to access when writing a relative path, yes, sorry for the long question. Okay, for the long question, but that's my question. Do just write one forward slash, that's all, when accessing whatever you want to access with relative to that directory and file you want to have.
Yeah, I just wanted to start out just a proof that my feedback wasn't coming from me, right? It was on the other side. Here's the thing, right? One thing you have to appreciate in whatever this career you've chosen is everything is distributive, right? It's convention. Some characters, some people that thought were smart, I suppose they were smart, sat together and decided to say, you know what, this is what we're going to do. This is what we've decided. We decided kilobyte is 1024. We decided on Unix that every time some character types in the tilde symbol, it's a home directory of that currently logged on user. So the tilde symbol is nothing more than a shortcut. I don't know if you can see this. It's a shortcut to your home directory.
Sir, you're on fast forward. Sir, you're on fast forward.
No, I'm not on fast. What do you mean I'm on fast forward?
You're talking too fast. You're talking too fast.
Just take it down a notch. Just take it down a notch.
Sorry?
Take it down a notch, sir.
Oh.
Talk a bit slow. Take it down a notch, sir. Talk a bit slow.
Okay, right. So one thing you have to appreciate, right, this career path you've chosen is everything is convention. Everything. And there's more conventions coming your way, right? Which is why I'm even getting to the stage where I bet to start emphasizing that practice is going to be your best friend. The reason is because I've been practicing for years now, right? I mean, things like operating system. Every day I'm doing something, I'm running commands, right? So they've stuck up there. Right? So everything is convention. If something is convention, the only way to make sense is if you master it or something, or if you practice. So the tilde sign is a shortcut. Tilde is a shortcut to home directory. A dot is a shortcut to current directory. And you can check these things, right? If you just take out dot, to show you about current directory, I guess. If you current directory, right? If I want to access yes.asm, I can say file dot forward slash current directory, right? Forward slash yes.asm. Will come here. If I echo 2 dots backwards, it's a previous directory. No, you can't echo out. But if I change directory, double back, I'll go back previous. It's opportunity, right? I'm going backwards. So these are just shortcuts. Some people just came up with just, I guess, easier ways of accessing certain parts of the operating system in this case, actually. So yes, the operating system knows that when you type the tilde, when you type tilde, when you say tilde forward slash download, it knows that it's going to be the current logged on user's home directory slash downloads. Who is the currently logged on user? It's Lighton period. Right? This is my username. This is my username by convention. If this is my username, my home directory is going to be forward slash home forward slash username. So every time I say I want to tilde forward slash download, what I'm telling the operating system is I want to go into my current home directory, which is this. And so I will go to this slash download. This is how it works. If I tell my operating system to say, okay, currently I'm in my home directory, I go into downloads and then I go into Dropbox, right? Sorry, come on, I'll go into Dropbox. What is that? I'm in Dropbox right now. If I tell my operating system that I want to go hyphen is a shortcut to the previous directory I was in. If I tell it again hyphen, I'll go back to Dropbox. If I tell it I want to change directory, double tap or 2 dots forward slash, I want to go backwards, right? This is our shortcut really. So the operating system does know yet. The key takeaway point here, forget about the command, you don't have to do that, but the key takeaway point from this slide is the idea behind the relative path and an absolute path. One of them is relative to the root, right? Which is for Unix like operating systems, it would be the forward slash, that's the root of your file system. Good stuff. Right. So it turns out that there's I hope that makes sense. There's a whole bunch of additional characteristics here. We just kind of gloss over what are some of the most widely, I guess, some of the most widely used characteristics. These are characteristics that transcend different operating systems. So irrespective of whether you're using Windows, Mac OS, Ubuntu, Red Hat, FreeBSD, you will, or Android, you will
Dr. Lighton, could you try logging out and logging back in? You are breaking up.
You're still breaking up, sir.
files will have file name, right? Files will have the location.
Sir, you're breaking up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, now we can get you, sir.
Yes, now we can get you.
Thanks.
Now we can get you.
All right, great. So somebody was calling, right? So something very strange happened. I guess we might just wrap up now. Something very strange happened. I got this very weird email from my my ISP, right? They're closing shop. I didn't know they were in liquidation or something. I thought it was silly of them really, but I should show you this. This is quite nice. I mean, we're talking about microlink. So they're closing shop, right? They're closing shop. I thought it was really weird. So, and I think they've already closed shop anyway. And so what I'm doing now, I have transitioned though. I mean, I've transitioned to, I'm experimenting with a whole bunch of things. So I haven't come across, I haven't really fully exhausted, I haven't finished with my experimentation to narrow down on whether liquid or Zamtel is going to be better. But yeah, so that was strange. So which is why the I guess I was saying I was breaking because I'm tethering my phone and somebody was calling and I couldn't ignore them because I guess by in our culture they're very important or something, or at least at work anyway. They're very important, so you have to pick up the phone call. Sorry about that. If you ignore them, they'll think I don't know. Right. So,
Sir. Sir,
yes, sir.
what's the difference between a relative file system and an absolute file system?
But I just said the difference. The absolute one is relative to the root of the file system. An absolute file path is usually relative to somebody's home directory, right? Relative to its current location. Right? A relative path, one way of looking at the relative, one way of viewing a relative path is just a shortcut, a short form of the actual absolute path. And you gotta think about this for a second, right? Observe, right? If there we go, I'm going down the rabbit hole now, right? I'm just going to go into manipulation number 12. Look at this. Absolute path of where I store my slides on my computer system. Where is it? It's here. Long path, right? Very long path. It turns out it's a lot easier for me to make reference to this path. It saves me time actually, right? By just doing that. Okay. All right, so I was just saying that we're talking about some additional file characteristics. I was trying to emphasize on that for the fact that the characteristics that we're looking at are the ones that are widely used on most of these different variations of operating systems. So irrespective of what sort of operating system you're using, you typically, or usually the case that you will interact with file names, right? Timestamps and those things. But it turns out that there are additional characteristics like of whether a file is hidden or not, for instance. You can associate certain specific permissions to a file, and we'll see this, right? So specifying access at the group level, if you define groups on your operating system, specifying who has access to that particular file on the operating system itself, right? So there's more actually, but what we discuss are some of the more common characteristics, I suppose. We still find okay. Right. So an example of permissions here, and we'll look at this in our case study, right? On Unix, you typically view permissions like so, right, on the terminal. So there's a different segment of each file that you're seeing there. Slide the PDF. So each one of these things has a special meaning, right? Permissions associated with the owner of the file, the group, and everybody else, right? So you can notice for this file, the owner of the file has read-write access. The group, right, has read-write access. Everybody else on this computer has only read access to the file. So anybody who would come to this file and try and fidget around will not be able to write to it. They'll only read it, right? So permissions, but of course, I mean, you can view permissions using the normal file manager, right? Permissions tab, and you see this is what we're seeing on the terminal here. So owner can read and write, group can read and write, everybody else can just read. You can also specify whether it's going to be an executable file, right? So that when you type // the file name, then it executes it, right? So if I go in here and I go into Postman, for instance, I can literally see that this file here, it's actually color coded. I don't know if it's blue or something, but this thing here is an executable file, right? Because it's an executable file, it has an X at the end here, right? Everybody can execute it. I can just type // and then Postman, and then my operating system knows that it needs to execute that file, and then the application will come up and start, right? But anyway, permissions, right? And we look at permissions. When we look at the case study of the Unix operating system, we actually spend quite a bit of time looking at permissions, trying to understand exactly how.
Dr. Aiton, we are unable to get you, sir.
For real, sir, can't get a thing.
Permissions need to be specified on Unix operating system. But if you can't get a thing, how are you able to answer my question? I'm confused.
I didn't get it. I didn't even know that there was a question.
Yeah.
What he means to say is that they're breaking. Yeah, the network on that side is not stable.
I just asked a question. Okay.
Network on that side is not stable.
Okay. There we go. Anyway, I was just talking about permissions, right? Double back slightly. I was saying that we're talking about addition. Can you hear me now? Am I audible enough? Or?
Yes, now I can hear you, sir. Yes, now I can hear you, sir.
Okay. So we're talking about additional characteristics, metadata aspects associated with files, and we're just highlighting the fact that important characteristic of a file are permissions associated with the file. It turns out that you can specify who has access, which user has access to the to the files, to certain types of files on your operating system, on your computer. And we've seen this in Windows, where if you try and access certain directories, right, especially system files, if you say access denied, you'll have to log in as an administrator or something, right? So permissions, all those things are specified, all those things are characteristics of the file, in that case a folder. And you can view these by looking at, by using your favorite file manager, right? So if you look at the slide here, we're just showcasing how Dolphin gets to show you the different permissions associated with this particular file here. Guys, see you when you see me. We continue with operations, and then hopefully we get to look at the case study. Unless if there are any questions, I guess we'll wait a night or something. Oh my God, I have a class. Oh, I forgot.
Guys.
Yes, Leandro.
My guys.